2021. And so the 2021 funds, we actually essentially have 2 school years to spend those. And so, yeah, that's good news, because as you know, we adjust plans going into this school year, and we are using them in the same way that we've used them in past years. So that 2-year window will help us effectively use those funds and not have to return them to the state.
But you'll collect every year, right? I mean, like, it comes to about $70-some thousand, and if that's 1 year's worth, the 69 and the 7 and something else was there. Anyway, if those are used, you know, that you can have them every year, then it would make enough to make some pretty good changes, or at least keep someone employed for a while.
I'm sorry, what was the amount that you were referring to?
There's one for 26,000. I'm sorry, I said 69. That's the Title II. We'll get to it next. The 26,000 and the 7 comes to about $34,000.
Got it.
So if that's 1 year, then you do it twice. It should come to close to 70. It'd be about 69 grand.
Correct. And so that's kind of the thought process that I had with that, is that, you know, it doesn't get us very far for 1 year. We've had to change our plans for this year, but we do have the 27-month window for those funds that would allow us to put it together with the following year's funding and make it more effective for us. I will clarify, though, on the Title III immigrant program, the eligibility for that is very specific, and instead of it being based on a total number of students who are in the category, it has to do with a growth rate. So you have to grow at a certain rate in order to qualify. And we qualified a few years ago very briefly and then fell out of eligibility. So I don't know that we will get those funds. I go ahead and apply for them each year, and they ask to give them, you know, a projected budget just in case. But I, to be honest, don't expect that we may get those ones. But the EL program ones, those ones I anticipate we would absolutely get each year.
Okay, so within the last 3 or 4 years, you feel that we haven't qualified?
Well, we have at least once, because I believe there was 1 year since I've been here, and I think I've been here right around that amount of time. So there was 1 year that we did, and it was only about $3,000 or $4,000 total. And what we did with the funding was we used it for some extra duty tutoring time at our middle school. We had a Spanish speaker doing some extra tutoring with them.
Oh, okay. Okay. I've just, you know, it used to be Migrant Ed helped us a lot with that, because they did their enrolling every year. And since they no longer play a very big part in our summer sessions, I mean, they send money, but they don't get really involved. Sort of, they do, but not as involved as they used to be. It just seemed like maybe that contributed to why we weren't qualifying as well as before. Because I know they do a pretty big outreach, and we used to always have increases in numbers.
Although I would have to confirm with Jennifer Maples, but I would expect that the census data that they'd be using to make that determination would actually be based on our CalPADS reporting. So I would think we would still be collecting that as part of the student's enrollment record, and that it would still report to the state. I'm not sure how it would necessarily tie back to that summer program, but that's just speculation on my part.
Oh, okay. Well, I know when I used to do it, we turned it all into the state, and it used to help our district. And so I don't know what rules have changed or what's gone on.
Yeah, you know, that state reporting and CalPADS has just become so all-encompassing now, you know, and it parts of seabeds, and it sort of has, they've rolled other reporting into it. So I'm not sure how that was part of it, but we can certainly confirm that with Jennifer.
Yeah. Well, I haven't done it in a good 10 years at least. So, I'm sure it's changed. I was just curious if that was part of the problem.
Yeah, no, that's a
Oh,
good question
okay.
for us to identify, any ways that we can improve eligibility for programs.
Oh, okay. And so then on the last part of where it has Title III English learner year-to-date expenditures, it comes to saying, well, we only have $2,700 of non-spent money, okay, unspent funds.
Right, so that's what we'll roll from 1920 to 2021.
Oh,
So
okay.
those are the funds that we would want to spend soonest once we begin spending our EL dollars.
Right, that's why I
Expire.
was, so it looks like it paid for a half teacher or a half, no, it couldn't have been a half teacher. Would it
I
be a
don't
half
remember
aide?
yeah, it's a portion of a teacher, and I don't remember the exact FTE. It's sort of like each year, I just look to see how much is available there, and sometimes we have to kind of move that FTE depending on the teacher's placement on the salary schedule. But it is a portion of a teacher.
Oh, okay, it's just kind of rolled in and you just trade the funds or move
It's
the funds over in.
Well, it's like that person is funded by two different
Two
sources.
things. Oh, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I meant. Okie doke. All right, well, I appreciate that. There were just a couple of things I didn't get, and so I really thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
Any other discussion on item B?
Mm-mm.
Anybody want to venture a motion to approve?
Now I can move that we approve the Con App.
And second, please.
Second.
Okay, seconded by Mr. Chavez. Okay, any further discussion? Call for the vote. All in favor? Aye.
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 That carries. And we are at public comments for items not on the agenda. And I see Mr. Burton out there in the wind. Unmute your.
Give that.
I got it.
Okay.
One more
unmuted
time.
him.
Yeah, I think he hit it again right behind you.
Mute. How about,
Bruce?
Okay,
Well-
Bruce, you got the floor.
okay, thank you. Hey, I appreciate you letting me talk a little bit tonight. Obviously, I've talked to each one of you, and I want to thank you for taking the time to visit with me, the different board members. Everybody responded, and I appreciate that. I'm not going to go over what I've already put in my letter because I think you all saw that. What I wanted to address was just a couple other points that I think are relevant. I don't have a site plan, but of the property, but I did do a sketch of the property and made some assumptions about how roads were going to go. And from the readings, I saw that there looked to be some connectivity over to the Blosser Lane School by road. And so I come up with it that you're going to have close to 2,300 feet, or excuse me, about 1,600 feet of road to build with utilities and all of the accoutrements. Well, there's 1,600 feet on the peripheral, and then there's another 800 feet. Whoops. Oh, yeah. Well, there's a map.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I'm assuming it goes parallels the railroad tracks and then comes along to join into the existing road. And then you're going to need to do residential, you're going to need an interior loop or a couple roads with cul-de-sacs. And I came up with that of being close to 2,500 feet of road. And I talked to the developers, couple developers that I have some relationships with, and they told me to do a city approved road with utilities, all of the storm water, sewer, water, electricity, all of that underground is going to be close to $1,000 a foot. So they're looking at somewhere close to $2.5 million to put that, just to put the road in. I see that that takes up about 3.2 acres when you do that. And you got a 5.6 acre parcel, or 5.7. And you have this drainage ditch that runs along, that's kind of L-shaped, that kind of borders the east. I know that's problematic to the neighbors along Locust Street. I don't know what the developer is going to run into in terms of doing any kind of wetland mitigation. So I'm not throwing that in the picture at all. But with about $2.5 million just in road work, you're going to have, then you have just over 2.5 acres left to develop. Minimum lot size in Willits for residential, 6,000 square feet. You've got 15 to 18 lots. You're going to have $150,000 per lot in the utilities. And I think that's prohibitive for this market. And that doesn't address any other cost factors, much less buying the property. So that part, I just think you ought to look at as to what your return's going to be for a developer to even buy that with a residential zoning. It's an expensive property to develop. And it's mainly because the road goes along the border and you only get lots on one side of the road. As you can see, I mean, you're going to build this $1,000 a foot road around the property, and you only get to build houses on one half of it. And that's not what developers want to do. They do not want to build roads that only give them 50% utilization of the ground that it took to do it. So I think that's going to really affect what you're going to get for this in the market as a residential property. So that part is I wanted to bring up. The second thing is that in the background work that I've done, and I had some help doing in the process, the legal process of a school determining that they have surplus property and they wish to sell it, it appears that it's a pretty specific set of hoops that you've got to jump through. You've got to first offer it to a charter school. You have to, I mean, you guys are the experts, not me. You got to offer it to other contracting agencies, school districts, community colleges, and maybe you've done all that. Then I think you're supposed to set up an advisory committee of some school board members and community members to determine whether, you know, there's community support selling this this property. And then when all of that, after all that's happened, then the governing board meets in open session, 2/3 vote of the members must adopt a resolution to declare intention to sell the property. So I don't know that you've done all that. I assume that either you have, or maybe I'm in error on this, but I'd make sure that you've, you know, crossed your T's and dotted your I's in the process. And then finally, the other thing I'd like to mention is that, you know, as a heavy industrial property, it's marketable to the heavy industrial kind of users, which is of course ourselves. If it's zoned residential, it has no market value to me, and it can't be reverted. I talked to a couple board members that seem to think that, well, we'll get the residential zoning, and then if somebody wants to buy it for industrial, they can buy it for that, or if they want to buy it for residential, they'll buy it for that. No, it's a one-way street. Once you've rezoned it and it's zoned in residential, you don't hold that as an option as a landowner. That's what it is. It's residential. And clearly, just simply trying to take residential back to industrial, I wouldn't want to try and do it. I'm not going to do it. So I just wanted to throw those three things out there for your consideration. This is on the agenda for the Wednesday meeting at the City Council. I've asked that it be delayed they're not going to do that. They're going to go ahead and do it because they think they're going to be, and I'm not going to argue that. Unfortunately, I think you guys are going to be meeting this way for some time too. You know, I think it's a difficult medium to kind of feel like you're getting a full public hearing when you're in this format. But be that as it may, it's all legal. So, but those 3 points, the development costs are going to be really high per lot, really high, and that's going to come off the sale price. And then I think whether you've adhered to the right process getting to where you are, I think you want to make sure you're on firm ground then. And then this zone change is a one and done. I mean, if it goes, there's no going back, probably for anybody. You know, that site, I do have history with it. Going back to the mid-70s, you go out there now and it feels like big old hard piece of ground, but man, in the wintertime, it is close to a swamp as you can get. And that's when they're going to want to do their biological assessment of what the you know, the plant life and one thing or another is out there. So I just offer those up now, and you know, my other comments, I stand by them as well, that really puts us in a tough spot to be trying to be a good neighbor with 25 or 30 homes and a bunch of, could be renters. I mean, perhaps there's some, you know, some sort of a mitigation that people sign something, but that to me is not a real functional mitigation. And at this point, I don't find great comfort in that. So I know you guys can't discuss this in public session, but I really encourage you to, you know, of course, obviously I'd encourage you to agendize it for a special meeting and hear it before Wednesday at 6 o'clock, but that's obviously entirely up to you. But thank you for your time.
Yeah, we can discuss it all we want. We just can't take action on it. Bruce.
Let me address a couple of the issues. Bruce, I don't know if you read the stuff that I sent you, the studies.
Yeah, I mean,
the traffic study said between 92 to 140 sites. It's 8.5 acres. I drew a box up there on the top part of the lot. One of our caveats in selling it, that the road has to stay in place for a separation barrier. And in the top northwest corner here, we will be blocking traffic off so it's not through to Blosser. Our buses will turn around in a circle. It'll be bus only. So it's not going to be a through traffic road.
That wasn't in the information you sent me.
Okay, well, that's what we've put in the stuff that I gave to the city. It's not going to be a through traffic. We're going to stop buses. We're going to let buses come through here, this top part. Can you see where I'm moving that on the picture? Yeah, that place, that's the only place really adjacent to your property is right here. And we're going to make sure that that is bus only, because the buses might turn around in here and go back out, because we're trying to alleviate the traffic in front of Blosser, which you can appreciate because you're part of that. And so we're trying to alleviate that. This property for the district, this area, we're very aware that we got to do a 7-Eleven committee, and I have to go through the channels of seeing who wants it, who doesn't want it first. And then if they don't want it, the committee can determine that it's surplus and the board can vote to surplus the property and sell it. Our issue is really kind of simple. We're sitting on 8.5 acres of property. We can't do anything with it. We're not building another school. We can't take care of the facilities we have. And the city's #1 goal is residential housing. There's not enough housing in town. And they've been after me for 1.5 years to get this done. Multiple people have, not just the city, but other community groups want housing. And we have a spot that's a rock's throw from Safeway right in the middle of downtown. And it sits across from your drying racks that are more than 100 feet away from where any house would ever be. And so we're looking at getting it rezoned. That doesn't mean we're going to sell it. It doesn't mean that, you know, we could parcel it off and only do this box. We could parcel it off. But the issue is the district has some property, and if we get it zoned properly, it will be of value that we might be able to do something with it to help us with our other problems.
Well, Mark, the first comment, I guess, is that the city general plan amendment and zone change specifies it as 5.68 acres. So I took that right out of there.
Okay.
So I'm not sure, I didn't measure it off. I mean, I measured it by,
Yeah.
off a map just like this, but I didn't try and calculate the acres. So that part,
Yeah,
there's
that's
a
fine.
discrepancy there that I don't understand.
I want you to realize that part of what we're talking about is this space right here. That's along with that whole top box.
Well, what they drew in what's drawn in the zone change amendment pretty much outlines this property, just excluding the kids club and skirting those buildings on the southwest corner and then coming up. I mean, it seems pretty inclusive.
There's also a gentleman who lives right here who wants to put his acreage into it. He wants to sell as well. He
Well,
hasn't gone through the process, but he's interested.
well, I don't know how you come up with 140 lots, even if you give yourself 5 acres instead of 2.5.
And I'm not a developer, Bruce. That's really not where we're at. We're in trying to get a piece of property as saleable as possible, and we're not going to develop it.
Yeah, Mark, I just think as you know, in the spirit of the ordinance or the rules that you've got to follow, it is putting the cart before the horse to rezone it and then go ask a charter school or ask a college or ask a parks department whether they want that property. I mean, I think I think you are clearly taking it out of a school use, and that is that you are in fact changing. You are declaring it surplus property by doing a zone change because it no longer is a school. Other than the fact the school can condemn residential property and put it anywhere it wants, but it sure seems to me that that you are not playing quite square with the rules.
Well, I think that you're not correct in that assumption. You assume I've not talked to any of those groups, which is not the case. And when schools build, they have different zoning issues that they deal with. Just like the school owning industrial property, the school's not considered industrial property, even though the site it's on has industrial property. So,
well, they bought industrial property and made it school zone property because they have the authority to do that. I mean,
right. As those other schools would as well.
Exactly.
I don't know the total history behind that property. I don't know how long it's been in the district. Do you have any more information on that, Bruce?
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you exactly, Alex, but it was purchased, I believe, in the early 80s, somewhere between 80 and 84. The school went through quite a process in the late 70s. They had a site council and everything, and they actually owned some property over on Bechtel Road where Caltrans is now. There was a plan to put a school out there years ago. And they got rid of that property, and they were hunting around because, as I put in my letter, the middle school, my son went to it, was on the egg farm behind the high school, in portable buildings, and so he went to school over there, and this school was built. Well, you probably know. I mean, I think in the early 90s. So, you know, it had been sawmill property I've got maps and pictures of it being sawmill property going back into the 30s and 40s before that.
Exactly.
Blossom
Okay.
was built in 88, 89.
Thank you.
And Bruce, my question for you is, what would you do with this property if you were a school board member?
I'd put it up, I mean, I'd go through the process and declare it excess property, and I'd put it up for sale and see if I got an offer that was adequate to my expectations.
When it's zoned industrial, there's nobody who's going to want to put an industry there. They would be even more encroached than you feel you would be.
Well,
It's not industrial unless you're going to buy it and throw logs on it.
I would be an interested party if it comes up for sale as industrial property. And I told you that 4 years ago.
Yeah.
I didn't say what I was going to do with it, but I was interested in it as industrial. It wasn't to put a zone change on it.
Well,
It might be just to be buffer property. Who knows? But
well, it's still got a process to go. If you want to throw an offer at the board, be my guest. It's again.
But you told me you couldn't sell property that way. You had to go through a process.
We do.
I'll wait for the process, I guess, to come up, and when it's on the market, I'll put a price on it. But I didn't think it was going to go through a zone change. I didn't, in my wildest imagination, think that the school would be in the development business.
We're not.
Well, obviously, we're not in the development business, but as I explained to you on the phone, Bruce, my position is really quite simple. The district finds itself between a rock and a hard place when it comes to dealing with some of the major infrastructure issues that we have. And that's largely because we failed with passing the bond, the most recent bond. I don't have any illusions about the chances of this next one passing, only because of what's going on right now politically across the region. But I mean, it's always possible. If I had my choice, we wouldn't sell that property if this next bond attempt passes in November. But once again, the goal here is to maximize the value of that property. I don't know. I'm not a developer. I couldn't begin to guess how they would put roads and so forth in there. We can only go with what information we've got on the table at the time. So I do appreciate the effort you're putting into this.
Well, city streets got to be at least 50 feet wide, and it's got to have sidewalk, curb, and gutter. It's got to have storm drain.
Yep.
I mean, you could divide it up. You want to put in lots that are about 6,000 square feet or in that neighborhood. So now you got to get roads to it. It's not rocket science, but anyway.
Bruce, what is your opinion of it? What is its value as an industrial piece of property? You put a value on it as an R2. What's its value as an industrial?
Well, I think you actually have a fair amount of comps. You've got more comps probably as industrial than you do as undeveloped. I can't move your map, but I was going to try and show the property just to the west of you. There.
Yeah, I don't have that in my. That's just a snapshot.
Oh, okay. It's not. I got you.
Yeah, but you obviously were interested in it, so I think you must know somewhat of a value you think it's as an industrial piece of property. I'm curious what that is.
Well, I guess as a buyer, the last thing you want to do is toss out a number in a conversation like this. It isn't. I don't think that it's. I just don't.
It's probably not appropriate, and I tend to agree.
It's not a format that I would do at that.
I mean, the move there would be to simply have the property appraised as industrial. But, you know, we may be beyond that point.
But you know, I can say, I guess what I could say is that, you know, a roof and trading that lot for a roof and a parking lot will solve a roof or a parking lot problem, but it won't solve your real problem of having money to maintenance money for your facilities. You know, you can fix one alley or two alleys or something, but it is a Band-Aid over an epidemic.
Yeah.
Okay. Any of the board members want to make any comments?
All right. Hey, thanks a lot for letting me poke my head into your business here for the evening.
No problem, Bruce. Thank you for your time.
Okay. See you guys.
Yeah.
If I can figure out how to get out of here.
It's hard.
Alex,
Yes.
I have one other thing.
Go ahead.
Just a note to let folks know that we're going to have a second meeting in September. And the reason for that is we have to do our, okay, I got to get this acronym correct. It's our learning, what is it? It's our new LCAP that we have to have done. It's not
Right.
called LCAP, but it has to have 2 readings, and it has to be done in the month of September because about 90% of the funds or more have to be spent by December.
Right.
And
I
so,
recall talking about that.
yeah, I put together, Trina's doing some proofreading for me for the committee that I have for that. And I'm going to be putting that out this week to get to them and start doing some meetings and some discussions. But just to let you know, we need to pick a date late in September to have a second meeting. It can be a one item agenda meeting, but
Mark, it's learning, continuity, and attendance plan.
yeah, they renamed it LCAP in a different way.
Yeah.
Just to make sure I'm totally confused on all these acronyms. But it's the loss mitigation funds and some of the CARES Act, some of that stuff is all rolled into that. And it's just like LCAP. I seek input from others, and then I have to put a plan together and present the plan.
I don't have a problem anytime in September. Don't know what the status of the rest of the board.
Let me get a calendar.
Okay. Briefly, let's talk. Bruce brought up a couple of interesting points. One was talking about the roads and the width of the roads, and you know the development of potential of the property is dependent on some of those things. And quite frankly, I haven't looked at any of that. The question I would throw out is, have we had a consultant at all look at that from that perspective?
The only people who've looked at that from that perspective are the city planner, the traffic people. The traffic people maxed out the property. What would be the maximum capacity? But
were they doing that simply based on acreage and square footage, or did somebody actually look at it from the position of, you know, if you actually put roads in there to access the properties?
No,
the
they
lots.
used roads. They did a drawing that put in roads and
Okay.
cul-de-sac and how many houses can fit based on the square footage. But
I also know that there are other mitigating factors that go in there too, and a lot of it comes down to what the city's willing to do. For example, I can show you actually very new construction projects, even in the Novato area, much higher density with very narrow roads. And the reason why they allowed that sort of thing is because they put more fire hydrants in. They made sure everything was sprinkled. You know, attics wasn't just a typical residential sprinkler systems, but more like a commercial sprinkler system in all those homes, so that they could have that higher density and have narrower roads. So I know that there are ways to have higher density and make all that stuff work, but I won't say that it's easy, because being a fireman driving a fire engine down through one of those roads was never fun, because the parking on each side plus the roadway, there wasn't a lot of space for a mistake, but it works.
Right.
So,
well, we did an archaeological study, we did a traffic study, we did a ecological impact study was done. We've done everything we need to do for that property. And, you know, Bruce didn't come out and say it, but obviously it's much more valuable as R2 than it is industrial. Can you imagine that somebody's going to buy that and put their industry next to the school? Probably not.
yeah, it would pose difficulties. Plus, it's also got residential on the one side of it as well. So
Yeah.
There's no matter what you do, somewhere properties butt up against one another, and the uses are not always ideal. I mean, look at Remco being right where it was for all these years.
Right.
So, and somehow we managed to make it work.
Right. And again, we're all on the same page about, yeah, we'd like to keep the asset if we can. And November 4th, or well, actually it takes 2 weeks here after an election to know anything. Let's just say by Thanksgiving time, we'll know that if we want to put the piece of property out for sale.
Right. And again, it's the board's prerogative. What it boils down to is even if the 7-Eleven committee comes back and recommends that we consider it surplus and put it up for sale, that still does not obligate the board to move forward with it. So.
Right. And I believe that what's going to happen is that there will be people who might be interested in if we sectioned it down. Because Bruce is right, you got to have significant financial backing to come in and do that big a piece of property. And
Yes.
they may come in and do that first bit that comes right off of Locust Street. And if that's successful, they move on. So we would have to make those choices as well. But again, we don't have many assets available, and we have some significant issues with facilities that we have to deal with.
Agreed. Dates for a second meeting in September?
Yeah, I'm good, all of them except 29 and 30.
Well, that would mean 28's the option, Paula.
Oh, okay.
Because 31's not an option in September.
Okay, you don't like the week of the 21st? That's too soon?
I just assume we wait till the end.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm sorry. Those are the two I can't.
That's fine. Trina, do you have that?
9/28, yes, I do.
Yeah. I
Okay.
think we should target that as a potential meeting date, because we need to have a second meeting in September, and we'll have a draft hopefully for our first meeting in September.
Okay. Everybody else, excuse me. Everybody else work? Does the 28th of September work for everybody else?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Is that
We're up
5
against-
o'clock, 4 o'clock,
5 o'clock.
5?
I can't imagine we'd have a closed session meeting at that. It's the second meeting of the month. I'm hoping we don't need a closed session for the second meeting.
Okay. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
And a second?
I second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
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 Hopefully we'll be up and running strong on Monday.
Yeah, that will be good.
Things are getting organized. Teachers are doing a good job putting it together. We're getting schedules out, and I did
Got
some
spring-
radio clips today you'll hear.
Do you have some sprinklers going at the high school yet?
Oh yeah, we are blasting water out on the field.
Very good.
I
Thank you.
really appreciate Bethel Grove's communication with the board about how things are, their weekly bulletin. I'm glad that to know what's going on at Bethel Grove. I like to have the same information from the other schools.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.